Ani, Adele Loosemore and Dijnakas, Shebahonaning and Donjaba. Hello, my name is Adele Loosemore and I'm a Treaty Indian from Shebahonaning. My community is located at the entrance to the North Channel of Georgian Bay in the Robinson-Huron Treaty area. Today my community is more widely known as Killarney, Ontario. In this video, I'm going to take a look at whether or not the Boissonneau family meets all the requirements of MNO's registry policy. If you want more detailed information about MNO's policies and registry practices, in the description box below this video, there's a link to the first video in this series called Policies and Practices. Here's the shorter explanation. According to MNO, people who were half Indian and half European are not their Métis ancestors. And neither are their children. MNO's Métis ancestors are people with two parents of mixed Indian-European blood. But MNO doesn't follow its own registry policy. Many people that MNO says are not their historic Métis ancestors are in their registry as historic Métis ancestors. And many people that MNO says they will not accept as members of their organization are members of their organization. People of today don't have Métis rights under the Constitution unless they can trace their ancestry back to a specific historic Métis community that existed before the date that settler governments took control over that area. Legally, it's called the date of effective control. For Sault Ste. Marie, that date is 1850. MNO's registry includes ancestors that MNO claims are the Métis people who were in their historic Métis communities before settler governments took control of the area. That's how MNO's members are claiming Métis Aboriginal rights. So first, I'm going to look at whether the Boissonneau family complies with MNO's own registry policy. Then I'm going to show you some historical information about the Boissonneaus. First of all, does MNO show us that the ancestor was one of their documented Métis? MNO calls a person a documented Métis if a historical record shows that the person was listed as a half-breed, or someone called that person a half-breed, or any other word or phrase that means the same thing. MNO also says that the ancestor must have two parents of mixed Indian-European ancestry. And the ancestor must have been in the historic Métis community before effective control. In this case, that means before 1850. On the left is a copy of the chart in MNO's document. I removed some data from it to show just the first couple with their 9 children. The names in the gray boxes are their spouses. Then on the far right is the couple by themselves. That's who I'll be starting with. That gold dot beside Joseph's name indicates that he's a documented Métis. But MNO doesn't describe the ancestry of his parents. And they didn't identify his wife, Marguerite, as a documented Métis. So it appears that there's no mixed ancestry to mixed ancestry parentage for this couple's children. You'll see later that Joseph was in Sault Ste. Marie before 1850. Joseph, Magloire, Theophile, and Emery are all in the same situation. MNO says they're documented Métis, but they didn't have two parents of mixed ancestry. None of their wives were identified as mixed ancestry. Theophile and Emery's children were all born after 1850. None of them meet the rules set out in MNO's registry policy. Narcisse and François are in similar situations. Narcisse is a documented Métis, but he didn't have two parents of mixed ancestry. Since his wife has also been identified as mixed ancestry, let's take a look at their children. MNO says that Narcisse Jr., Madeleine, and Isabelle Elizabeth are documented Métis, and they also have two parents of mixed ancestry, but they all were born after effective control. Joseph, the oldest child, was born before effective control in 1848, but MNO didn't identify him as a documented Métis. Back to the children of Joseph Sr. and Marguerite. François is one of MNO's documented Métis, but he didn't have two parents of mixed ancestry. MNO says his second wife, Marie Corbière, is a documented Métis, but she was born after 1850. Some of François and Marie's children are called documented Métis, but they also were born after 1850. Narcisse and François and their families don't meet MNO's policy for being members of the historic Métis community. The last three children are Lucille, Leon, and Marie. None of them, none of their husbands, and none of their children were identified by MNO as documented Métis, so they don't meet MNO's registry requirements either. Here's the original chart from MNO's verified Métis family document. But when we apply MNO's policy, here's what the chart looks like. Not a single ancestor in MNO's Boissonneau family meets the requirements MNO set out in their registry policy. They were not MNO's documented Métis with two parents of mixed Indian European ancestry who were in the historic Métis community of Sault Ste. Marie before 1850. Now let's look at MNO's historical data from this report called Upper Great Lakes Historic Métis Community. It's one of the reports that MNO submitted to the Métis National Council's expert panel. There's a link in the description box below to a web page on MNO's site where people can download this report and others that they submitted to the panel. Sault Ste. Marie is marked on this map by the red dot on the left. This is what MNO says about an event that happened there many years ago. In 1850, when the Métis in Sault Ste. Marie learned that they had been excluded from the Robinson-Huron treaties, they rallied together to submit a petition, asking the Crown to respect their land claims. Among the 55 signatories were the heads of prominent Métis families, including Joseph Boissonneau and 6 of his sons. MNO calls Joseph Sr. a documented Métis because he was one of the people who signed the 1850 petition of Sault Ste. Marie. They don't cite any other evidence for a Métis identity in their verified Métis family report. Let's look at how the petitioners describe themselves. This image is an excerpt from page 1. The petition was addressed to the Governor General. It says, "The petition of the undersigned inhabitants of the village of Sault Ste. Marie humbly showeth, Your Excellency's petitioners, with the exception of some 5 or 6, are all of mixed Indian blood and have been born upon the soil, that each of them has held, occupied, and cultivated the land whereon they now reside for very many years, most of them having inherited their possessions from their mothers, and the residue having purchased from half-breeds or Indians, that the 5 or 6 first above referred to came to the country some 30 or 40 years since, and married Indian women, through whom they acquired their said possessions respectively, which they have occupied and cultivated ever since." The wording of the petition tells us that there were 2 groups of people who signed it, and there was a letter from the Ojibwe chiefs that supported the petitioners. Here's what the chiefs said about them. First, they referred to certain lands at the Sault Ste. Marie, whereon several parties had settled and cultivated, several of them for upwards of 40 years, by and with the consent of ourselves and people, and with scarce one exception, all have married Indian women, and by them have families. And their description of this group is just like the one given by the petitioners themselves. Then the chiefs said, with these exceptions, meaning other than the several people we just talked about, the whole of the inhabitants of the Sioux are what are termed half-breeds, very many of them the children of the sisters and the daughters of your memorialists, thus having an inheritance in the country equal to our own, and bound to it by as strong and heartfelt ties as we ourselves. The petitioners and the chiefs described the 2 groups of signatories the same way. The half-breed inhabitants occupy the land through blood connections and family connections. The 5 or 6 exceptions occupy the land through the blood connections and family connections of their Indian wives. Remember, the chiefs said that those several parties who were not half-breeds were living at Sault Ste. Marie with the permission of the chiefs and their people. If someone's name is on the 1850 petition, it doesn't automatically mean that the person was a half-breed. It was actually titled "The Petition of the Undersigned Inhabitants of the Village of Sault Ste. Marie," and that included Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. So which group did Joseph Boissonneau belong with? The 1861 census of Canada West and the historical data that MNO submitted to the expert panel state that Joseph was born in Lower Canada. MNO says he was born there in 1787. That's a long way from Sault Ste. Marie. He certainly was not born upon the soil of the land he was petitioning for. In a 2008 book called Lines Drawn Upon the Water, Joseph's birthplace is given as Lévis, Quebec. I added a blue star to this map to mark its location. It's just across the St. Lawrence River from Quebec City. A note in the same book and a report compiled for MNO in 2011 indicate that Joseph Sr. had been living in Sault Ste. Marie since 1816, 34 years before the 1850 petition. That information accords with statements in the petition about several signatories who came to the area 30 or 40 years ago. MNO disagrees with that date. They say when the island was surrendered to the Americans in 1828, Joseph, Marguerite, and family packed their belongings and departed Drummond Island for Sault Ste. Marie. Then, in a map on the same page, MNO disagrees with themselves. They say 1837, Joseph Boissonneau Sr., Marguerite Guimont, and children moved to Sault Ste. Marie, where they occupy a river lot alongside other Métis families. Here's what MNO says about Joseph's wife, Marguerite. The voyageurs and their families were loyal to the British and moved with the British garrison from St. Joseph Island to Drummond Island, where Joseph married Marguerite Guimont, who, according to her children, was from Manitoba. At the same time, they seem to back off from that information about her birthplace. Here's an excerpt from a map on the same page of their report that isn't so confident about Marguerite's origins. 1826. Joseph Boissonneau Sr. and Marguerite Guimont, who may have been from Manitoba, are married on Drummond Island. MNO also says, family histories tell us the Boissonneaus had a strong connection to Penetanguishene because Marguerite died there in 1839. If that's true, then who's the mother of these 3 children that I marked with an orange arrow? Boissonneau had numerous children by 2 wives. The first was a Cree Métis from Red River, named Marguerite Guimont, and the second a native woman, MNO Métis, Nawe Métis. According to MNO's verified Métis family document, Lucille Boissonneau was born in 1841, 2 years after MNO says her mother died in Penetanguishene. This is an image of the 1864 marriage record for Edward Lambert, born in France, and Lucie Boissonneau. The witnesses are Joseph Boissonneau, probably Lucie's father, and it looks like Nancy Métis. It might be another spelling of Nancy Métis, Joseph Boissonneau's second wife. The 1861 census of Canada West asked enumerators to record each person's age as of the following year. Leon Boissonneau's age was given as 13. That means he was born in 1849, 10 years after Marguerite's death. This is a copy of the 1864 marriage record for Marie Boissonneau and Charles Gravel. Here's a closer view of the part that says Marie is the minor daughter of Joseph Boissonneau and the late Nannies Métis. An entry in the Holy Cross Church Register in Waquemacong shows that the priest performed several marriages in Sault Ste. Marie on October 11th, 1844. One of them was the marriage of Joseph Boissonneau Sr. to Nancy McGizabonaquay. According to MNO, Joseph's first wife had been dead for more than a decade, resting in a grave in Penetanguishene, when Joseph signed the 1850 petition. Nancy McGizabonaquay was his wife at that time, a circumstance that's consistent with statements made in the 1850 petition and in the supporting letter written by the chiefs. Both documents referred to inhabitants of Sault Ste. Marie who were not born there, were not half-breeds, and were married to Indian women. If there's a Métis connection for Joseph's older children, it appears that it's not through their father, and it's not to Sault Ste. Marie. Many of Joseph's children and grandchildren, and so on, became members of Garden River Band or other First Nations communities. And, since MNO regards the 1899 McCrae Report as a credible source of information about identity, any of MNO's members who are watching this video might be interested to know that Inspector McCrae reported to Indian Affairs that Joseph Boissonneau Sr. was a white man with a half or three-quarter Indian wife.